I love Kazakhstan. It's a small country in terms of population, but a very big country in terms of landmass. There's only a couple really big cities, and then the rest is just open. And so where I served is a city called Almaty. The city of Almaty is in the very southeast corner of the country, so it's close to China. The people there are awesome. You know, coming from Russia, of course people are awesome in Russia, but they are really busy. They're a little bit more Western. People call them coconuts, where they're really hard on the outside, but once you get to know them, they're really soft on the inside and sweet. In Kazakhstan, I guess they're just like peaches, because they're just soft all the way around. The city of Almaty, I think, has about 3 million people. Beautiful city, tucked up against the mountains. It's pretty awesome. The people in Kazakhstan, or at least in Almaty, there was about, I would say 60% were ethnic Kazakhs, which I guess is related to Turkish, and so they're relatives of Turkey. And they've typically been a nomadic society. And then the other 30% are Russian, and then there's 10%, you know, from all other different cultures. But there's a big Russian population in Kazakhstan, and by Russian I mean ethnic Russian. The language there is primarily Russian, but most of the ethnic Kazakhs speak both Russian and Kazakh, and so they grow up bilingual. And the languages are not related. They're not even close. The whole structure of the language is completely different. The alphabet is the same, and that's just because when there was the Soviet Union and Kazakhstan was part of the Soviet Union, they kind of imposed the Cyrillic alphabet on the Kazakh language. People say that there wasn't a writing style to Kazakh beforehand. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it just kind of shows their culture. They're awesome. The people themselves are just so overwhelmingly nice and accommodating and hospitable. You know, a lot of times we'd go and we'd knock on doors, and on several occasions people would get these big grins on their face when they saw us. They'd invite us in. They'd offer us some bread or some cookies or tea. Obviously we didn't drink, you know, black or green tea, but we'd have herbal tea. And then they would afterwards say, okay, who are you and what do you want? Pretty much. Which showed that just there's this culture of community, you know, of everyone helping everyone else. And if there's two people that they notice that, you know, look hungry, look like they've been out in the weather, you know, let's invite them in and let's give them something. And then it doesn't matter who they are or what they want, we'll accommodate them. And we had that happen several times, and it was really awesome. The people are, like I said, just so nice. Typically, it was a lot slower paced than it was in Moscow, where everyone's busy, everyone's worried about business, and of course that they had that in Almaty as well. But the people were really humble, and I know people hear that a lot when we talk about Russia and Kazakhstan, and what I mean by that isn't necessarily that they were poor. Yeah, a lot of them were poor, a lot of them weren't, but it seems like they weren't trying to compete with their neighbors. They weren't trying to show, look, I have more than you, I make more money than you, or I'm prettier. You know what I mean? I didn't get any of that vibe, kind of like we do a little bit more here in our country. I thought that was really admirable. A lot that I admire about the Kazakh people. The traditional Kazakh food is beshparmak, which is a horse, and so horse to them is kind of a national staple, which is weird coming from a Western society to eat horse, but it tasted pretty good. The dish itself was kind of like a soup, where they had types of dough in it and a broth, and then the horse meat. It was really good. Kazakh culture, the traditional culture, is kind of a communal style eating. I remember they wanted to get us used to, or introduce us to the traditional, you know, Kazakh style of eating. And so what they did is they laid out a clean carpet mat sort of thing on the floor. Everyone sat on the floor around the carpet, and there were a couple of bigger serving bowls with the food, you know, noodles or whatever meat. They always had some sort of flat bread that they'd serve with it, and you dug in with your hands, and everyone was shared from the same bowls. That you didn't get your own plate, you know what I mean? When I explain it, it kind of sounds like really messy, you know what I mean? But it wasn't messy by any means. It was very, very clean. Even though you're eating with your hands, you know, we got dirty, but everyone else, they were very clean about it, and I guess they knew how to do it. But that was interesting. Other foods that I remember they always tried to cook, you know, some of the best or traditional food. So I remember going to one house and it was basically a seafood soup. And by seafood, I mean there was all sorts of stuff. It was basically just a broth, and you could see tentacles of little squid or octopus in there. There were clams and shrimp, all pretty much just at the bottom of this soup with broth. It doesn't look like a tentacle, you know what I mean? It's been cut up or whatever. So that was interesting. We had a lot of fun with that, and it was actually really, really tasty. I like seafood. There's very little, if any, processed food. They don't like processed food. They don't eat processed food. Everything is very, very fresh. And so you can find a little market at the corner of almost every street, kind of like we can find gas stations here. But they sell fresh fruit. They'll sell meat that hasn't been, you know what I mean, processed. It's just gone from the booker, packaged, and is now for sale. And so people will, they won't go on shopping trips that'll last them a month. You know what I mean? They'll go every day or a few times a week to get their food and produce. So everything, I remember that it was really fresh, and I actually felt a lot better eating, you know, everything that was freshly prepared instead of kind of prepackaged food. Lots of fruit, lots of vegetables. It's an affixual language. So what that means is the way that they do grammar is they have all sorts of suffixes, which are, you know, little portions that they add on to the end of the word. Kind of like in English we have run, running. Ing is a suffix that you tack on. In Kazakh they can have like 5 suffixes tacked onto the end of the word, and so a word can get really long. And so that was really hard to get used to, and I'm still not used to it. I learned a lot more than I remember now, just because back here I literally have no opportunity to use it. But for example, my name is, you'd say Minningatum Jacob. To ask what is your name, you say Sizdingating is kum. I remember this one I learned really early, and it stuck with me. It's kind of funny. It just makes people laugh to say Aksha Jok, and you throw your hands up in the air. And that means I don't have any money. And they always laugh, because I don't know why. It's an inside joke there maybe or something. But oh yeah, Kalin Kalai is how are you. Because it was part of the Soviet Union for so long, the people, you know, Russian culture was integrated to the society. The Soviet Union actually sent Russians to Kazakhstan on assignment to live, so that, you know, the Russian seed was kind of spreading out. That's at least from what I understand. And so it's been, I don't know how many years. When I was serving there, it'd been maybe about 15, 16 years since the Soviet Union collapsed. And they're still struggling to assert a national identity. They don't want to be seen as a Russian province, you know what I mean, or a post-Soviet Union country. They want to be seen as Kazakhstan, an independent sovereign nation and people. It's interesting, when I was serving there, they had just passed a law that all of the streets would be referred to with their Kazakh names. Because prior to that, they all had Russian names. I don't know if they gathered all the old maps that had the Russian street names and burnt them, or I have no idea, but when we got there, there were no maps with any of the Russian street names. Problem was, since this is such a new change, and they pretty much gave every street a new Kazakh name, the people still referred to them with the old names. And so we'd ask people for directions, ask them where they lived, and they'd tell us the Russian street names, and we'd look on the map, which only had the Kazakh names, and we'd have no idea what people were talking about. So we actually had to write in next to each street, you know, okay, in Kazakh, this street is Dastik. In Russian, it's Dostoevsky. Anyway, so it was a nightmare. So I think that just shows a little bit about the culture, where even in the language, they're really trying to assert their own nationality and separate themselves from Russia and say, we're Kazakh, and this is who we are, and this is what we speak. So